Okay, well, we will begin. I'm sure others will continue to join in. But good morning, good afternoon, and from those joining in Bangladesh, good evening. Really appreciate everyone joining today. My name is Julia Roberts. I'm the president and CEO of BRAC USA. And I'm so glad to be with you today, just 2 days before World Refugee Day, a moment that invites us all to pause, to reflect, and to recommit. This time of year always feels significant to me. World Refugee Day is not just a date on the calendar. It's a reminder that now, at this very moment, more than 120 million people around the world have been forced to flee their homes. And for many of them, that displacement is not measured in days or months, but actually in decades. As many of you already know, the Rohingya community in Cox's Bazar is one of those communities. They have now been living in the world's largest refugee settlement for nearly 9 years. Many of the children born in the camps have known no other home. And yet, resilience is real. Hope is real. Progress is possible, and it is happening with the support of people like you and through my colleague, Morshed Bai, who is with us today, and the entire incredible team in Bangladesh. But most importantly, the people that we serve and we build our programs and deliver them with. Today's conversation is not a crisis briefing. We've invited you here because because you are some of BRAC's most committed partners, and we want you to join in a conversation beyond numbers and statistics. Today, we'll talk about what's working and how humanitarian responses around the world are changing. And just so you know, we will have questions and answers, so be thinking of your questions. Feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll respond to them at the end, or you can always come off of mute as well and raise your questions at the end. Before I introduce my esteemed colleague, though, we're going to watch a short video from the camps themselves to provide a window into the daily life, into the weight of the crisis, and into the spirit of the people living through it. Tiara, if you could play that.
Sokina, a name that belongs to a 60-year-old Rohingya woman. She arrived here in Bangladesh having made the grueling journey from Myanmar. She traveled utterly alone, with no relatives to accompany her. Her arduous trek took 25 days to complete, eventually bringing her to Kutupalong in Cox's Bazar, now the largest refugee settlement on earth.
I crossed so much water. I simply saw people moving and followed their direction, desperate to save my life. I was starving for days. Wherever I found water, I would try to sip it and start again. I was all alone. I stumbled, I fell, I drowned in the mud. Wounds were all over my body. People helped me out. I got up, and I started again, seeking refuge, desperate for survival. Some were kind enough to offer a little snack, a little water. That is how I came here, through immense hardship. While I was still in Myanmar, amidst the conflict, treatment was simply unavailable. There was no medicine. It was only here, after several difficult months in Bangladesh, that I was finally connected with BRAC. They provided the care I desperately needed: medicine for my ulcer, my diabetes, and other ailments. The volunteers are tireless. They come to my hut to check how I am doing. I feel truly cared for, and I am getting better.
নাইলে রাইতে লতি কোল যায় দুধ দুধ করে হলে দুধ ভাত দেয় সমস্যা একদিন একদিন হয়ে
With my diabetes and high blood pressure, it was so hard for me to manage. To collect water, I had to travel down into the mountain valleys and climb from one mountain to another. It could take me 2 hours just to fetch a single jar of water. Now, after they set up the piped water system, everything has changed. I can fetch a jar of water within a 10-minute round trip. I can take my rest, comfortably do my chores, pray, recite the Quran, and even spend time with my neighbors. Now I have enough water for drinking, for the latrine, for washing clothes, and so on. It is all so much easier for me now.
Sokina's story stands for thousands. It is this dignity that BRAC seeks to protect. BRAC Humanitarian Crisis Management Program continues its sustained response, ensuring the essential needs of the vast Rohingya population are met.
It's definitely striking. And as we mentioned earlier, the Rohingya crisis is now in its ninth year, and it remains one of the largest displacements in the world. There's over 1 million refugees in Cox's Bazar. There's 33 camps across the corridor in southeastern Bangladesh. The population is growing. More than 30,000 children are being born each year. And the pathway to return to Myanmar remains distant, and these conditions continue to be unsafe. At the same time, global humanitarian funding is declining. Many major donors, including the US government, have significantly reduced the contributions to humanitarian programs. For an operation the scale of Cox's Bazar, those cuts are not abstract. They translate into reduced health services, fewer learning centers, less food per family, and more uncertainty for these families who have already lost so much. 1.28 million. That's the number of people BRAC reached in settlements and host communities in 2024 alone. We are present in all 33 camps, providing services, health, education, water, sanitation, livelihoods, child protection, and shelter. And what makes BRAC different and what we're proud of is that we don't just deliver services for people, we design them with Rohingya communities, investing in their power and capacity to shape their own futures. That philosophy is at the heart of everything that we want to talk about today. And no one can speak better to this than Morshed Bai. And I would like to now introduce him. Cam Morshed is the Senior Director of Advocacy, Communications, and Engagement at BRAC. He was one of the architects of BRAC's early response in 2017, and for nearly a decade, he has been at the center of BRAC's strategic thinking and advocacy around the Rohingya response. Before joining BRAC, Morshed spent over a decade at UNDP and has built a career at the intersection of innovation, development, and humanitarian system change, and he does it with such a big heart. Thank you so much for joining us, Morshed.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, Julia.
Okay, wonderful. Well, let's kick it off. I'd like to start with the big picture. The Rohingya response has now entered, like we said, the ninth year. The global humanitarian funding has shifted dramatically, and yet the needs in the camps continue to grow. What do you see as the most significant shifts in the response right now? And what do those changes tell us about our actions in Cox's Bazar and where we're headed?
Thank you. You said it mostly that there is more people now inside camp. Some estimates suggest 1.3 million people from 1 million, and those who came as a kids 10 years ago, they're now grown up. That demands and diversity increased. These are all, and the funding went down. These are all facts that we know. What is not discussed often is the frustration, the losing of hope. when they first came, many of them thought that this is just a, temporary shift. Some thought 3 months, some thought, okay, 1 year, give it 2 years, 3 years, and there are a lot of international discussions were happening those days, how they can go back. Now, after 9 years, as you can imagine, the hope is fading fast. That creating the frustration, which is the newest element. The second change is the social cohesion. Those who came at the beginning, it was the host community who welcomed them. Historically, they were family ties, they were from the same communities, and so on and so forth. That's fine, but how long can you host a guest? After 9 years, and Coxbazar is one of the poorest districts of Bangladesh. So that there is also strained relationship between, and unlike in many countries where the host and the refugees live for example, in Thailand, there is 10 kilometers between the nearest, household or host community from the refugee camp. It's just opposite to each other across a road, a 30 feet, 40 feet road. So that's another thing that's palpable. And the third thing I think that's worrying me a lot is that the engagement of the international actors. There are newer, theaters to talk about. Ukraine happened, Afghanistan happened, Turkey earthquake happened. So there's a shift of energy and effort. So all this thing has created a very complex situation where people are now demanding more immediate action. You don't have fund, and not the world is getting more and more silent about it. This is the perfect formula for a disaster to exhibit, and that's what really is the negative side. The positive side is many of us, including the UN, is realizing that the same old is not going to work. So that's created a new urgency to think anew, to think differently. That may lead to something that would be more useful for the Rohingyas, if you may. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And I think when you raise that, right, it's that transition from when do you think about it as a short-term response and when do you start programming for like a long-term situation, right? And nobody quite knows when that line is passed.
Yeah,
And yet there's children that are, at the age where they're going through school and would graduate. There's people building families, And so
yeah,
how does BRAC move, like how and when did you move from that emergency response into sort of building things? Like for instance, when I was there, we talked a lot about like livelihoods. How do you
yeah,
actually like allow people to like create livelihoods or their own income,
yeah,
because they're not going back, anytime
yeah,
soon, right?
yeah,
Over this period of
yeah.
time. But how and when did you
The,
make that choice in programming to sort of
it's a
move?
very difficult question, and there are a lot of the political discussion that needs to
Yeah.
happen. But so just to illustrate this point, where I asked a Rohingya living in the camp all 9 years, is a very active blogger, told me in one of my visits when I was having a tea with him just to have a chit chat, and he said, "Moshad bhai, even if I put you into the world's nicest hotel and tell you that all you can eat is the buffet that is in the offer, how long can you sustain in that hotel? And I ask you, you cannot go out of the hotel. You can't, right? You feel the human being is not meant for this side of situation. So that, and then when you still have a hope that okay, this is a temporary, next 1 year I'll be only living in this hotel, I'll go out, or even 5 years I'll go out. Now you don't know when you are going to. That's so BRAC, we separate this thing into three phases. First is the emergency stabilization, now the protracted. Now, protracted has its own challenges. For example, the global humanitarian architecture is not prepared for protracted crisis. They're all for short term. and we are also finding it to respond adequately. Uh, so if you ask BRAC, uh, and if I can take a little bit of time, BRAC is a known to be a community-led long-term. If you look at BRAC's specialization, this is the resolve or continuity or do whatever that is needed to solve something. And that's, we are bringing that ideas, those techniques, those approaches into the camp. So we have done, for example, we have connected the Rohingya artisan with Arong, Bangladesh's biggest lifestyle brand. So we have helped Rohingyas to lease unused land of the host community so that they can start producing fruits and vegetables. Now, of course, officially they cannot participate in the local market, but there is nothing stopping them from producing their own, product. Because if you think about 1.3 million people in a place, which is larger than many countries in the world, so if they can have their camp economy going, uh, so one of the things that we have, as you know, BRAC runs the largest microfinance operation in the world. So we brought in part of these tools into creating a rotating savings and credit association within the camp. So at least these people can decide what they're going to do with the money that they have. So it's really giving them the dignity that every human being need, who can, even if you don't have lot to eat, you should have the choice to say what you want to do with this. So we're bringing those things. Some of the more common things like the wash facilities. 83% of the wash facilities and wash work is now done by the Rohingyas themselves. So again, bringing them so they feel them valuable. They are seen as doing something for their own community and decided by themselves. So we are bringing all those development approaches into the camp, fully aware that this is not a development situation, this is a humanitarian situation. Protection is a huge concern, security is a huge concern, but we are bringing the ideas and molding it for the context. And that's what we are trying to do, desperately trying to scale up so that this frustration doesn't become a explosion, if you may. Uh, yeah,
Can I ask you, I think I get a lot of questions from people about, about the limitations on household income. So you
yeah,
just mentioned it a bit, right? People can't participate in the local economy, but they
yeah,
can do goods and services and be their own independent entrepreneurs for income generation, if I'm
yeah,
correct. Can you
yeah.
clarify a little bit there? Because obviously household income is critical for being able to have choice and et cetera. But what is that differentiation? Is it limitation on employment, but you can make your own funding, or how does that go with regards to limitations on the local economy?
Okay, there is some part of it is don't ask, don't tell basis. You don't get formal employment, but then a large number of camp residents uh, can and actually participate in the labor market of the Cox's Bazar. And when you produce your own fruit, legally you can only sell within the camp. But you know, there is hardly any way that this can be fully restricted. Yeah. So we are trying to leave some part to the private sector, but from our side, if we can enable a person to be a productive agent, uh, then they can sell it inside, outside, uh, whatever that is available in this, because not everything is within our control. But we first want to empower this person, bring back the hope in him, allow him the space to be creative, so that they can solve the whatever problems. Everywhere there are problems in Even if you're a Bangladeshi living in Cox's Bazar, starting a new business is not easy. But you have the freedom to be creative. That's what we're trying to bring for the Rohingyas, if you may.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And as we speak about funding, I'd love to talk a little bit about maybe some of the people that have joined us today have heard about the pooled fund for localization. I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit on designing it. I know that you're at the center of this and where we are today. I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Sure. This is also, I would say this is also part of our larger empowerment story. If you're a organization in Cox's Bazar, because the international funding flows through a particular discipline, which might be completely different and in some cases probably not required to do work in the Cox's Bazar camps, like maintaining a toilet, distributing food, and so on and so forth, might not need a international capacity to procure goods internationally, if you may. But the traditional funding requires all those things. So what we're doing, we BRAC saying, okay, we take this risk, we are the risk sink, give us the money, we build the capacity, we monitor the activities, and we bring the local organizations in the delivery. So far, we are working with 27 of them. And expectedly, for some activities, this local organization is even 40% cheaper than UN, but delivering the similar quality because this is being monitored by UN itself. So that's our localization pool fund. And something that we don't speak out very officially, but this Rohingyas, this rotational savings and credit association is also another form of localization, so that the Rohingyas themselves can start solving their problem using money that they didn't have previously, if you may. Yeah. So, which is different. It just attracted a lot of international attention lately. The even OCHA had a pool fund of $2 billion from USAID, and they could only deliver 2% of the money through national and international NGOs. But in our case, 100% money goes to local actors, be it a Bangladeshi NGO or through those, ROSCAs, Rotation Savings and Credit Association, so that the Rohingyas themselves can start solving the problem, if you may.
And on this, is part of the pool fund also when you were working on the design of it, right? You just spoke about the fact that delivery can be 40% more cost effective,
Yeah.
when BRAC is implementing it.
Mhm.
And I believe a lot of that is because it's an integrated system. Obviously you go into Cox's Bazar and sometimes, there's three or four organizations providing the same services to the same
Yeah.
people, right? And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
creates inefficiency, right? And in a system where we can't be inefficient. How
Yeah.
how is that integration going? Because I think in some of these sort of this new way of working, BRAC is looking at sort of at a camp by camp basis where we're providing all integrated services so that there doesn't have to be that duplication. How is that
Yeah.
coordinated?
Yeah. And, let me take a step back and say, when you don't have a lot of money, which is a situation now, you must have to innovate ways of delivering services more efficiently and effectively. When there's a crisis situation, when the Rohingya first came, they didn't know the language, they didn't know the landscape. I understood that's why you need, center where you provide health, another center that provides nutrition, another center mental health. So they're different, and maternity clinics are different. But now after 9 years, we thought, it doesn't make sense and it confuses people. It actually deplete the accountability line. So under a what we call a humanitarian development coexistence project, what we are doing, we are putting all of these into 5 centers across the camp. And in every center, just like a community hospital or clinic, they have all the services: mental health, nutrition, primary health, secondary health, and maternity, a 20-bed clinic, and so on and so forth. So by doing that, we could reduce the cost tremendously. We could improve accountability because now we are monitoring the health parameters in block by block. So I know which block are doing well, so I can know which center is doing well in delivering. So and the Rohingyas also know where to go when they have any ailments, if you may. So this is the integration that we are piloting. That in many areas like. Uh, and then not only these integrations, additional ideas are also, uh, you know, interesting. For example, uh, in those humanitarian development nexus things, we are saying, previously every sector like health, wash, education had an engineering department because they needed to do things quickly. We integrate them into one engineering department. You don't need, six engineer working on the same block because things have settled down now. We know it's almost like a community. You know what are the challenges. So we reduce the engineers, we reduce the managers. So this is another way we are reducing this cost and improving accountability.
And
So,
and sorry to interrupt. And how
hmm.
does that work between other organizations? So BRAC is there, but there's other organizations also delivering services. How is that coordination with other entities working?
So one is this: what we're doing now is now mandated by UNHCR as a pilot, and the sector coordination mechanism is also involved with us. So what we're doing, we are piloting things that are working are being now promoted with other. Now we are just finishing up a document between national and international NGOs, which we are working with also the donor to kind of try and convince UN to adopt the whole thing, package as a standard. There are some pushbacks, there are hesitations because UN also have this fragmentation issue to deal with. But I think it's going well. It's going well, and uh, hopefully this will give some lessons from the rest of the world, rest of the humanitarian crisis, because most humanitarian crises nowadays are prolonged and protracted, not like those years where everything is finished in 3 4 years, if you may.
Absolutely. If I was thinking actually we might have a few more questions, but if we could just tee up, we have another video to share, and then we can.
Sure, sure.
Aral berak di harat tu hingga je sarangin tu selama dia arah hingga je volunteer un aral dana di dun foto din meeting goje harat wara dana kiba lagai ba e baba baba lagai ba ta ga laga mu aral lagai lagawan hore volunteer aye aral foto di sagar gar jagoi to bola gala dari bada abbar volunteer aye sai tak wara ki goje hoira ta aral ni lagoje hoira aye tar পরিবেশনা di dura jar goje gi to zona hore jara hai bada ata ashara ke sudi ata ashar ke sudi bar ke so asudun beshi to besonar hore ara foindera hata holom keni di karabit farai jihad to ara ki দিয়ে সুযোগ কি হয় আর একটা করে খাই খাই দেন শুক্রিয়া ননি আর তো শস্য মোহনা জামাটিয়া না লাগে খেয়ারা খেতে তোমার আমি ভাই দিতে লাগে তাহলে তো টিয়া হইছে দেখি দিতে লাগে আর তো না লাগে
Thank you. And for supporters and on the call right now, that might be thinking about how their own, donations or dollars can be of support, and what can make the most difference. What would you say to them?
Uh, yeah, for example, the first video talked about having a water system which serves the entire camp. So that's around 25,000 residents. And you just need $25,000 to establish the entire water system, water distribution system, pipe water system for a camp. Uh, so, which means, 25,000 people now will have easy water access to their doorstep, if you may. The health care clinics needs around $8,000 per year. A primary school, or as we call it, learning center, because school is a taboo. Uh, so with $10,000, you can run a learning center with around 100 kids for the entire year. Uh, if you think about, if you talk about $5,000, this can, use to repair the water source of safe drinking water that can give safe water for around 30,000, 1,200 people for the entire year. So this every now that the money is going down, every dollar matters. Whatever you can contribute, this has huge, there's a real impact in people's life in providing, drinkable water, sanitary napkin, health services, uh, and that's really significant. Especially, I would say, the money in health is shrinking like anything, and this is one of the basic need. You cannot think about a community who doesn't have health supports these days. So this is you can do a lot with even $5,000, if you may.
Absolutely. Actually, something you just said, and maybe for some people they wouldn't know it. You said school versus learning center.
Yeah.
What's that dynamic?
So this learning center, the thing that we are struggling in this learning center is giving them a acceptable certificate. Schools is part of a larger school system. They have their own examination and certificate section system. Inside the camp, you don't have any acceptable. We tried to get ASEAN certification because Myanmar is a member of the ASEAN countries. We were not successful. There are CT and Guild. This sort of certification is very expensive per person if you only do the certification. So we are still struggling, still discussing with, BRAC, uh, JPG, James P. Grant School of Public Health, and our piece of institute. We are collaborating with Bard School University and Open Society Foundation to see whether we can also offer some certification at the higher level. So if that, we have the program that we have is very limited, like 20, 25 students. We're trying to expand to see whether some of this certification can be borrowed from some of the larger institutions who are credible in their own right. But that's the challenge. That's the challenge, right?
Absolutely. It struck me when I was there. Like I know a few of the people that I met with had come to that age and then actually ended up teaching in the learning centers because they had, graded out it and were adults, right? And so if you're
Mm.
talking about a decade, you're talking about people that are moving into, wanting careers and wanting to move
Yep.
through, and so I realize that we're grappling with that certification or that
Yeah.
documentation of
Yeah.
of a high school diploma or of a secondary school.
Yeah.
And it is really challenging, right? I mean, what
It
can you
is.
do at
It
that
is.
point? It's so difficult. And where do you
Yeah.
move beyond there? Because you can't relocate, you can't get employed, and then you also
Yeah.
don't have certification.
Yeah. And so this certification, we're trying out and continue to try ideas like, can we have a skill certification?
Yeah.
Because
An
otherwise, if you're a
equivalency or
student,
something.
your motivation also is affected. That, at the end of the 10 years, your high school diploma, You don't have anything
Yeah.
to show for. So that's the challenging. But here is interesting question from anonymous. Someone is, I guess, you
Yeah,
can choose
exactly. You want to
favorite,
respond
but
to that?
there a program? Again, it's very difficult to choose which is my most favorite. But our newest initiative, this rotated, the Roscas, which really respect the dignity of the people, let them do the innovation and let them find and choose the best use of the resources that they have. Is not chosen by a UN agency, by an NGO, and we're not telling you what to do with your money. So that I liked, and I'm really hopeful that that gives people the dignity and hope, which is about looking towards tomorrow. And then this tree plantation and the gardening is the one video that you have seen is also very interesting, because not only because you are producing, you are slowly developing a market ecosystem inside your camp. So that's what I'm proud of. Uh,
Yeah. I'm one of our participants. Thank you for sharing this story where a resettlement family was in your parish, and agreed, like, getting information from the camps and understanding the current realities can be difficult. And I absolutely appreciate that, the funding that you want to support, you want to, make sure goes through a reputable organization that you can make sure it's getting in the right hands. And you're asking for the recording, et cetera. We absolutely, my colleagues Nashmeen and Tiara are on the call along with Salman. We will make sure that you get the recording. We'll also continue to send updates and information. And if you ever have any questions about the Rohingya or what's going on in Cox's Bazar, never hesitate to reach out. We're more than happy to share materials and updates. But I'm really glad you were able to join us today. Um, I want to just open it up. Feel free, anyone, if you want to come off of mic and ask a question, or if you want to put another question in the chat box. I mean, I know Morshed can talk about this all day long. But please add any questions you might have in the chat.
this is an interesting thing. When refugee they started arriving in August 17 of 2017, and Eid holiday was in 31st of August. So, and at BRAC, we were not aware of this big influx, because the year before there was a small influx of 30,000 people. And so when we heard this news that Rohingyas are coming again this year, we have just told our staff to go and do and provide the services, give services, especially health and wash, to the new arrival, because we also thought there will be, another 20,000, 30,000. And so we went into Eid holidays. And before the holidays are over, the newspaper started publishing horrible stories. So we all went back into office, went to Cox's Bazar, and witnessed probably the most horrible scenes in my entire life. You know, mothers cradling their child who is already dead, but the mother didn't know. Yeah, so that was the situation that we have seen. It's a chaos. Thousands and thousands over. And initially, the men were not coming. It's only the women and the children.
Yeah,
Men were still hopeful that they could survive,
yeah,
or they were sending their family to safety and then themselves staying back and protecting whatever asset they had at that time. So this was a horrible scene. I was there feeling helpless. And those days, BRAC were undecided whether we should be doing humanitarian because we are a development organization. So we then raised it to our board in the September board meeting, and the board reluctantly agreed. So I was in Cox's Bazar from probably 1st of September and stayed there for 2 months until we figured out what, and we started our operation. Uh, but it's really a nightmare that still haunt me, those sins. Yeah.
Well, and I've been with BRAC just for a couple years, but you've been such a major part of my experience at BRAC even over the last 2 years. And and hearing you speak about the your engagement and your, I mean, you really have spent so much time with so many people and so many Rohingya, and I'm
Yeah.
really thrilled, and we're all lucky that you're sitting at the table both in designing the programs and advocating for the policies around the system.
Yeah.
And
Someone actually asked Abid Bhai when someone from the board in the board meeting, I was there in the board meeting September, and someone asked Abid Bhai that why are you interested about Rohingyas? You're a established development program for 50 years. And then Abid Bhai said, BRAC is for the most vulnerable and marginalized people.
yeah,
And that vision has no country attached to it.
agreed.
So doesn't matter if you're a Myanmarese or a Bangladeshi or in Uganda or Tanzania. If you need help and BRAC can help, BRAC should be with it, working on it.
Yeah,
So that was the response actually that convinced our boards that okay, something that needs to be done, because our board was quite reluctant because there is still a almost a theology and debate between
a divide
development
between
professionals
development and humanitarian.
and
No, it's
and then our board also had few humanitarians who thought BRAC, you should stay out. This is, but Abid Bhai said, they are the most vulnerable. There is no doubt about it. And we cannot just stay out because, we are uncomfortable. It's not
yeah,
about BRAC's comfort. So what we have done, we hired a lot of humanitarian experts at those
yeah.
days so that we can learn from and actually do the work, if you may.
Well, and when I was last with you, the at the time the head of UNHCR was, I was in a conversation with him, and
Mm,
and he mentioned to me, I mean, I don't come from a background of working in
mm,
humanitarian assistance, and
mhm,
obviously he does, and he was mentioning to me, he was like, we have crisis in so many places, but there's very few, if any, places that have a partner like BRAC with the
mm.
capability to do it, right? And so I
Yeah,
think that when it comes to your doorstep, I think the founder really sat down and said, how do you say no, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
these are
yeah,
people in
yeah,
need, and we have the capacity, so we have to stand and deliver.
yeah.
And I think the founder also always talked about hope, right?
Yep,
And so
yep.
right now, and maybe as we close off, unless there's other questions, what gives you hope right now? It's not easy. Like you said, there's frustrations. You have so many memories and history and continue to struggle towards, providing support. But what gives you hope right now?
Yeah, I cannot lose hope on humanity. I'm a development worker. I've seen disaster in my entire 30 plus years of career, and I've seen people, walk back from the brink of disasters. Uh, so that's my first hope. Second is actually, I'm seeing some level of consensus arising out of the crisis, not only in Bangladesh, globally. UN started talking about humanitarian reset. They're talking about, can we do better? Can this be localized? And so on. And, you know, despite all these cohesion issues, conflict, if you go and ask the poorest of the poor in Cox's Bazar, I did that.
Yeah.
And there was one meeting when I, sat with a group of our ultra poor group, as we call it, people who doesn't have even money for 3 square meal and sending their kids to school. So I asked a group of women, 30 women was there. That's our group size. So I asked, what do you suggest? Should we kick the Rohingyas out? We stop giving them food or services? What do you suggest? And one of them said, look, bhai, they are not here for tourism. It's in a Cox's Bazar, everybody came for tourism, but they're not here for tourism. And she told me that you can't imagine what has to happen to leave your home
Hmm.
and flee.
Yeah.
So they went through that trauma. We know that we also want to leave and we also need food. So I will request BRAC to take care of us, but not forget them and do whatever you can do. So at
Yeah.
that level, at the proper, if when you, know the challenge, the trauma, the sadness yourself, is very easy to connect. Is the disconnect is between the slightly well-to-do and people who never faced it. So I think Cox's Bazar being one of the poorest district, there are a lot of us, lot of them who really understand the trauma.
Yeah.
So again, I'm pinning my hope on humanity
Yeah.
and the understanding. And thirdly, if it goes bust, the impact will be felt all across the Pacific.
Yeah.
I think the powerful countries and forces know that it's better to help this community rather than pushing them to the brink of,
Yeah.
a disaster. So all of this should work. And as they say, you cannot be a humanitarian worker if you are not optimistic. I'm
Yeah.
extremely optimistic. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's probably a really good note to sign off on, right? It's, hope in humanity and being optimistic against all odds. Morshabai, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for those supporters on the call. And those supporters that weren't able to join today, many people have reached out and asked for the recording, and so we'll make sure that you all get those materials. And again, thank you so much, Morshed, and thank you all for joining this morning, this afternoon, and this evening. So take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.